I never used to believe in ghosts. The idea of spirits lingering in the world of the living seemed like nothing more than a concept from horror movies or ghost stories people told to scare themselves. But that was before the call started. That was before I heard his voice. It began on a cold October night, just past midnight. I had been asleep, lost in some half-forgotten dream, when the shrill ring of my phone shattered the silence. Ring, ring. I groggily reached for my phone, expecting it to be a wrong number or some drunk dial. But when I looked at the screen, my heart nearly stopped. The caller ID showed a number I knew all too well. A number I had erased from my contacts 6 months ago. A number that shouldn't exist anymore. It was Daniel's number, my best friend, my brother in everything but blood, dead for half a year. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. This had to be some kind of prank. Someone must have gotten hold of his phone. Maybe a scammer, maybe a sick joke. But even as I thought that, something in my gut told me this wasn't normal. Hesitating for just a second, I swiped to answer. Hello? At first there was nothing. Just a hollow silence, like the void itself was waiting on the other end. Then I heard it. A whisper. Software faint, unmistakable. Ethan. My blood turned to ice. It was Daniel's voice. I nearly dropped the phone. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a recording? Maybe someone was using an app to mimic his voice? But it sounded real, too real. I forced myself to speak. Who is this? My own voice was unsteady, my fingers trembling around the phone. Ethan, why didn't you pick up? I couldn't breathe. What was he talking about? Pick up what? Daniel had died in a car accident. A freak collision on a stormy night. There had been nothing I could have done. I swallowed hard. Daniel? This isn't funny. Who the hell is this? The whisper came again, a little stronger, a little closer. You left me alone. I called her, and you didn't pick up. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I remembered now. The night Daniel died, I had missed a call from him. I had been half asleep, thinking I'd just call him back in the morning. But by then, he was already gone. A cold sweat broke across my skin. This wasn't possible. The dead don't call the living. They don't remember things like this. Daniel? I whispered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know. I didn't mean to ignore you. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a sound that made my stomach twist. A low, wet, gasping noise. Like someone struggling to breathe. Like someone drowning in their own blood. You let me die. The call cut off. I stared at the phone, my fingers numb. The screen went dark, leaving me sitting there in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, my pulse hammering in my ears. I tried calling the number back, but the robotic voice of the operator sent a new wave of dread washing over me. This number is no longer in service. I barely slept that night. My mind replayed the sound of Daniel's whisper, his final words looping in my brain. You let me die. It had to be a prank. Someone was messing with me. Someone who knew about that last call. But deep down, I knew the truth. Daniel wasn't just gone. He was still trying to reach me. And this was only the beginning. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Daniel's voice again. Hoarse, broken, accusing. You let me die. I kept telling myself it was a prank, some sick joke. But who would do something like this? And how? Daniel's phone had been disconnected for 6 months. even if someone got access to it. Why call me in the middle of the night? And how did they know about the missed call before he died? By morning, exhaustion had set in, but I knew I wouldn't find peace until I got some answers. I needed to trace the call, searching for a rational explanation. The first thing I did was check my call log. My hands trembled as I scrolled to the last received call. Unknown number. Not Daniel's number, not even close. Just a string of random digits. 000-000-0000. A dead number. My stomach churned. I tried calling it back, but the robotic voice returned. This number is not in service. I sat there, gripping my phone, heart pounding. It was like the call had never happened, like it had been erased, but I knew what I had heard. Still, I needed something concrete, a logical explanation. So I decided to check Daniel's old number. I dialed it, expecting an immediate disconnection. But it rang. Once, twice. Then, click, a voice answered. But it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't even a person. It was a low, static-filled distortion, like an old radio stuck between stations. Underneath the static, something whispered, too garbled to understand. Then, right before the call dropped, I heard a faint sound in the background. A car crash, tires screeching, glass shattering, a scream. I threw my phone down, my skin cold with sweat. That was impossible. That was the sound of Daniel's accident. My breath came in short gasps. Was my mind playing tricks on me? Maybe I was just tired. My brain distorting sounds in my head. I needed help. Reaching out to Daniel's family. Daniel's younger sister, Mia, was the only person I still kept in touch with from his family. We weren't as close as we used to be, but if anyone knew something, it would be her. I texted her first, unsure of how to even bring it up. Hey, Mia. Weird question, but do you know what happened to Daniel's phone? Did you guys keep it? Or did someone else get it? The response came almost instantly. We buried it with him. I stared at my screen, my breath catching. His phone? Was in his grave? Then who? Before I could even process that, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Mia. Ethan? Why are you asking? Have you been getting calls too? My blood ran cold. Too? I immediately called her. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was shaky. Ethan? Tell me you're joking. You're not getting calls from him, are you? I swallowed hard. Last night, midnight, it was his voice, Mia. Silence. Then she whispered, It started 3 nights ago for me. The same time, midnight. I keep hearing his voice, but it's wrong. A shiver ran down my spine. Wrong how? She hesitated. At first it sounds like him. But after a few seconds it turns into something else, like something is pretending to be him. A sharp chill settled in my chest. This wasn't just me. Did you answer all the calls? I asked. She hesitated. Number just once. After that, I let them ring. But last night, Ethan, last night, when I didn't answer, my phone answered itself. My pulse skipped a beat. What? She was breathing heavily now, like she was reliving it. It answered on its own, and all I could hear was static, but then I heard a voice. Ethan, not Daniel, something else. I gripped my phone. What did it say? She hesitated. Then she whispered. It said, he's not at rest. I felt like the ground beneath me had just collapsed. Daniel wasn't at peace, and something, or someone, was making sure we knew it. A disturbing discovery. After hanging up with Mia, I felt an overwhelming urge to go to Daniel's grave. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe I just needed to see it, to know his phone was actually buried with him. The cemetery was quiet when I arrived, the sky overcast with heavy gray clouds. I walked to Daniel's grave, my heart hammering. I knelt beside the headstone and stared at the fresh soil. His phone was down there. Then my phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Unknown number. I felt paralyzed. My thumb hovered over the screen. Answer it? Let it ring? I took a deep breath, then swiped to accept. For a moment, silence. Then the faintest whisper, distorted and unnatural. Ethan. I'm still here. A chill ran down my spine. My eyes darted to the grave. That voice. It was coming from beneath me. The phone slipped from my fingers. The call ended on its own. I stood up, my legs weak. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Something was terribly wrong. And whatever had started was far from over. I stumbled backward from Daniel's grave, my breathing ragged. The call had ended, but the words still echoed in my ears. Ethan, I'm still here. The voice had come from beneath me, from inside the grave. My skin crawled. My rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that it had to be some kind of horrible coincidence. But deep down I knew the truth. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't just a bad dream. Something was very, very wrong. I turned on my heel and ran. The calls won't stop that night. I barely kept it together. Every little noise made me jump. My phone sat on the table, screen dark, but I knew it was only a matter of time before. Ring! I flinched so hard I knocked over my glass of water. I didn't even have to look. Unknown number. I hesitated. I should let it ring. I should ignore it. But my fingers moved on their own. I answered. For a moment, just dead silence. Then, that familiar static. Warped, shifting, crawling into my ears like something alive. And then, the whisper. Why did you let me die? My chest tightened. Daniel? A pause. Then the voice changed. It was still his voice, but wrong, slower, distorted, like something was mimicking him, but didn't quite know how. I'm so cold. My fingers trembled. Where are you? A sharp breath crackled through the speaker. Then, underneath, buried, trapped. Pull me out, Ethan. Let me out. A chill stabbed through my spine. I ended the call and threw my phone across the room. The horrifying realization. I needed help. I called Mia, my voice shaking. He called again. She went silent. Then she whispered, Ethan, something is wrong with Daniel's grave. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Mia hesitated. I went there today, after we talked, and when I got there. She inhaled sharply. The dirt was disturbed. A deep, sickening dread curled in my gut. No, I whispered. That's not possible. I thought maybe it was an animal or something, Mia continued. But then I saw. Ethan, I saw fingerprints in the dirt, like something had been trying to claw its way out. My hands went cold. I could barely breathe. Then she whispered something that made my blood freeze. I called the cemetery office. Asked if anyone had messed with the site. I swallowed. And they checked the security cameras. She hesitated. Then she said, Ethan, no one has been near Daniel's grave in weeks. I gripped my head, my pulse hammering. Then how? I don't know, she whispered. But there's something else, something worse. I didn't think my body could feel any colder. What? She hesitated, like she was scared to even say it aloud. The caretaker said. She took a shaky breath. They keep hearing a phone ringing at night. But when they check, there's nothing there. The air left my lungs. A phone, ringing from underground. I stood there, heart pounding, mind racing. This was beyond anything I could comprehend. And then, before I could even process it, my phone rang again, the moment of sheer terror. I didn't want to answer, I couldn't answer, but my phone answered itself. I stared in pure horror as the call connected on its own. The static was louder this time, angrier, like something screaming beneath it. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite human, I heard, "Let Mr. out." And then, a loud, deafening crash behind me. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. My bedroom mirror had shattered. I gasped, stepping back, glass crunching under my feet. My reflection was broken, fragmented, twisted versions of myself staring back at me from every shard. And then, in one of the larger pieces, I saw something behind me. A shadow, long, distorted, and watching me. A cold hand clamped over my shoulder. I screamed. But when I turned around, nothing. I was alone. Except I knew I wasn't. The call had ended, but whatever had started, it wasn't over, not even close. The air in my room had turned icy cold. I stood frozen, my breath visible in the unnatural chill. The shattered mirror lay at my feet, glinting in the dim light. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone, staring at the screen. Call ended. But I knew it wasn't over. I forced myself to move, to think. I needed answers. Daniel's grave, the phone ringing from underground, the claw marks in the dirt. Something was wrong, deeply, horrifically wrong, and I had to face it. The final confrontation, I grabbed my keys and called Mia. "I need you to meet me at the cemetery, now." Mia didn't ask questions, she just said, "I'm already on my way." By the time we arrived, it was well past midnight. The cemetery was silent, suffocated in an eerie fog that clung to the gravestones like fingers. My hands shook as I stepped toward Daniel's grave. The last time I had been here, I had run in terror. Not this time. I knelt down, my heart hammering. The dirt looked undisturbed now, but I knew better. I pressed my palm against the ground. It was cold, too cold. Then, a sound. At first I thought I imagined it. A faint, muffled ringing. Mia gasped. "Oh my God, do you hear that?" I nodded, my throat dry. It was coming from underground, from inside the coffin. The horror beneath. I don't know what possessed me to do it. I started digging. Mia hesitated, but then she joined me. The cemetery ground was soft, almost like it had already been disturbed. My fingers clawed through the dirt, my mind screaming that this was insanity, but I had to know. We dug for what felt like hours. And then, thud, my fingers hit something solid. Wood, Daniel's coffin. I exchanged a look with Mia, my entire body trembling. Ring. The phone was still ringing. I grabbed a rock and began prying open the lid. The wood splintered, the coffin creaked, the scent of rot filled the air. Then, as the lid cracked open, I screamed. The truth is more terrifying than death. Daniel's body was not inside. The coffin was empty. Mia covered her mouth in horror. "Wait, where is he?" I stared at the vacant space where my best friend should have been. My mind struggled to make sense of it. And then, ring. The phone was there, lying inside the coffin. Still ringing. My hands shook as I reached for it. Mia grabbed my wrist. "Ethan, don't." But I had to. I lifted the phone, my fingers numb. The screen flickered. One word appeared. "Answer." I swallowed hard and pressed the button. For a moment, nothing but static. Then, a whisper. "Ethan, you finally found me." My blood ran cold. The voice was not Daniel's anymore. It was something else. Something wrong. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. The voice continued, slow and distorted. They buried the wrong body, Ethan. I'm still out here, walking, searching. Mia clutched my arm. Ethan, we need to go. Now. But I couldn't move, because at that moment, the phone began to dial. By itself. I stared in horror as it connected to another number. And then, my phone started ringing. I pulled it from my pocket with a shaking hand. Unknown caller. I answered, heart pounding, and then I heard my own voice whispering, Ethan, run, before it finds you. A cold breath slid against my neck. Mia screamed. I spun around and saw it. A tall, shadowed figure, its face a blurred, shifting void. It stood at the edge of the grave, watching, waiting. The phone slipped from my fingers. The last thing I heard before the line cut to dead silence was Daniel's voice, or what was left of it. You should have never answered. The horror never ends. We ran. We didn't stop running until we were out of the cemetery, gasping for breath. I threw the phone away that night, smashed it. But it didn't matter, because even now, my new phone still rings. Always at midnight, always from an unknown number. And when I answer, the voice on the other end is my own.